Hey, everybody. I'm really excited to introduce David Brown today. I've had the fortunate ability to work with David Brown over the past 4 years or so, both at his tenure at Duke Energy, where he was driving Agile transformation, and now more recently at EDF Renewables, where he is the Director of Product Ops and Strategy. Something that David always impresses me is his ability to really dive deep into the domain expertise. So whether that's in product, in design, or agile, David's always been that expert, but also his ability to inspire curiosity in others. Most recently, I found out that David's source of inspiration is actually not Marty Kagan, believe it or not, but his son that's 5 years old. So I'm really excited for David to share a little bit more about what he's learned from his son and how his son has taught him to learn and unlearn from a product perspective lens. So with that, I'll hand it over to David.
And she says she has the fortune, but I'm the one that has had the great fortune to work with Steph and the entire crew here at Method. So thanks for having me here today. And if you're here to learn about, the industrial side, I'm not going to talk a lot about that, so sorry, but we will talk about how the worlds of parenting and also product management have come together for me and helped me open my eyes in new ways. So if you're not a parent, not a big deal. There's still things you can pull from this. If you never want to be a parent, still not a big deal. We'll still cover some other areas as well. So what I would like to start off with sharing, though, is back in 2020, my wife and we decided to change our lifestyle a little bit. And we got the opportunity to move across the country. But unlike some of the people that I worked with, we weren't trying to do it over a week time frame. We decided to take maybe a year or so. And so we looked online and said, hey, can we actually live in Airbnbs full time? And after a little bit of number crunching, reaching out to a few people, we did just that. So we took off in early 2021, and we lived into a different city for about a month and a half to 2 months at a time. And we've learned a lot of things along the way. 8 weeks is that happy spot for us, because when you spend about 8 weeks in an area, you kind of see almost 2 seasons, if you will. You see a transformation in the local area. And whatever your experience was with the weather doesn't really carve out what you interpret that space to be forever. So if you were going somewhere for like 3 or 4 days and it rained the entire time, you're like, oh, that place sucks because it just rains there all the time. But for us, we got to take our family on this journey. And our son at the time, he had just turned 3. So we're moving around. He's not in any type of school. We already thought we were going to be bad teachers. And so then we got to learn that we actually are really bad teachers. And we got to really take off and go see parts of the US we hadn't seen before or experienced in a way. And it was very new for us because we mainly grew up in the southeast of the US. And in that time, I got to learn and unlearn a lot of different things. I'm going to share some of those things with you here today. But that's a little bit about me, but I need to understand who I'm talking to today to really kind of carve what we covered today. So I need to understand who's in the room. So if you're in a field within product management, quick show of hands. All right, good amount. If you're in more of a technical development engineering role, show of hands. Perfect. If you're in more of the process space, show of hands. All right. Management and leadership. All right. Innovation. All these kind of crowd across now. What's something I didn't call out? If I didn't speak to you just now, what did I miss? Design. Perfect. Change management or change leadership, organizational change, design. All right, perfect. So a little bit of everything. How many, so also we're bringing the two worlds together. How many of y'all have kids? Good portion, all right. So the marketing targeted that one really well. How many of you do not have kids? Okay, good portion as well. How many of you know a kid? All right, and how many of y'all have been a kid before? Still there? Perfect. I love it. You're actually the most dangerous person in project management and product management, in my opinion. How many of y'all worked with those product people that says, oh, I know what the customer wants because I was a customer for a long time? Yeah, I know what this kid wants because I was a kid before too. And then where they make a lot of sense together immediately is, how many of y'all have read product books, design books, industry books? All right. For the parents out there, or non-parents too, how many of y'all have read one of the many, many, many parenting books? I don't know about you, but I tend to finish the product or industry books. I tend not to finish the parenting books as much. Anybody else relate? Yeah. Did you figure it out? Like, did you learn it? So in both of those, for me, I learned a lot of great concepts. I also learned how distant I was from doing the thing, but it didn't close that gap for me. I don't know about you. What I did learn is I have to apply a lot of what I'm learning through articles, videos, these books, references, to find out if it does work for me. So maybe you have that experience as well. But the word unlearning is an interesting one as well. It usually has a negative connotation associated to the word unlearning, meaning you need to relearn something or unlearn something because you're doing it poorly. And so if you look this one up, even the references that the dictionary will give you are associated to the teacher had to unlearn how to categorize the students. But what I want to share with you is unlearning can be your superpower, but you really have to you have to make space to unlearn as well. And when you're in this constant state of learning, how many of y'all do a lot of reading or a lot of research today? When you're in this constant space of learning, often you're not creating space for unlearning at the same time. Okay. And I kind of stumbled upon it, shared that story of traveling the US, because I was fortunate enough to where it opened my eyes to say, oh, wow, how I used to look at these things may not be fair anymore. So one of the coolest parts about traveling around the US, and these are my two sons right here, that's Braxton, he is now almost 13 years old, ridiculous. And then Oliver, who at the time there was about 3 and now he's 5. And they are wild. And so when we travel to these different places, I have to get them outside. And what I got to see is some of the amazing playgrounds and parks and things that each one of the cities had to offer. And so we traveled up through St. Louis, phenomenal if you have kids, by the way, up through Tennessee, Alabama, down to Louisiana, through Texas, up to through Kansas. Not a lot in Kansas. If you're in Kansas, I'm sorry, not a lot in Kansas. Through Colorado, down to Arizona, then to California. And this is a playground in Denver, Colorado, and it was amazing. And so it was just a unique experience to be able to take these kids to all of those different places. And one of the things I learned, one of the first things I'll talk about here is the idea around intent associated to products and services. How many of y'all have ever tried to tell a kid how to play? How'd it work? Not well. Okay, so it's exactly right. So my oldest son, Braxton, when you take him to a playground, he does the things. He sees a swing, he swings. He sees a slide, he slides. He sees monkey bars, he monkey bars. But Oliver's not that kid. And so when he goes to play on a playground, he tries to misuse all the equipment in ways that it should not be used. And I caught myself trying to adjust him. And it woke me up. I realized, why does he have to swing on the swing? Why can't he climb on the swing? Why does he have to slide on the slide? And so this opened me up for more research, and I came across the idea of customer misbehaviors. How many of you are familiar with the power of customer misbehaviors? Got some head nods. It has a very small portion in that very popular Marty Kagan book. But there's a lot of paper out there, and there's its own book that was actually published in about 2010 to really go into this. And there's some fun examples associated to how this can also be a superpower. How many of y'all put Mentos into Diet Coke? It's fun, right? It's what you're supposed to do? Absolutely not. So in 2006, when this video went viral, showing that if you put a Mentos in a Diet Coke, it explodes. What do you think the impact to Diet Coke sales were? Sixfold. But they didn't like it. They're like, we want people drinking our product. We don't want people using it for a science experiment. But Mentos, they loved it. And what they normally spend, about 20 million a year in advertisement, they feel they got the equivalent for free in about 10 million of spend because of those viral videos. And so then they capitalized on it. They started building it into their press release. They started building it into their marketing materials. What do you think happened to their sales? Tenfold. It's very good for them. Creative furniture. Can anybody see what the brand is there? FedEx. This guy orders a lot from FedEx. He had built his entire apartment, his furniture, out of FedEx boxes. So this is just one example of his desk that he worked at for about 20 hours a day. But then he did, this is kind of a sad little table and chairs. And then bedroom furniture, everything else. How do you think FedEx responded? They sent him a cease and desist. They said that this goes against copyright and violates our trademark, and you're misusing our brand. You're degrading our brand. And so that they asked him to bring the website down with all those photos. I don't know if he was a FedEx fan after that, but then about later that year, it came back up and FedEx came around, but they potentially missed a pretty big opportunity there. And then who remembers Friendster? She was a big fan. I got one in the back too. Why did they get beat out? Why do we not hear about Friendster today? Do we know? Similarly, they didn't want people using their platform the way that they didn't intend for people to use their platform. And so Facebook and Friendster launched about the same time, and the interactions between the customers in those profiles started to see similar trends. And one of those trends was people started creating pages for their cats and dogs. I mean, fast forward, this many years, not a big deal, right? And Facebook started doing partnership with different applications so that they can expose that. And so there was a dog book and a cat book that people could then download, and they can show off photos of their adorable pets. They leaned into the misbehavior. And so this is an easy enough concept to talk about, but think about to yourself the things that you know about product management, your practices, the things that you do at work with your teams. Are you creating space to be able to observe misbehaviors with your products and services? How would you know if someone's using your product in a way that you did not design for it? And then what can you do about it? And you probably do this as a customer today. So quick response, how many of y'all use the Amazon app on your phone? And how many times do you use the app, not necessarily to buy something, but to research a product, to compare products? That doesn't make them money necessarily, directly, but they understood this and they leaned into it, and now they make it easier for you to see similar type products and to go in and see the information associated with those products that helps you make an informed decision. This is also a customer misbehavior, but not what I'm meaning. And so also, if you have some fun time and you want to go down this route, look at how many adults get trapped inside of kids' equipment and have to be removed by the local fire department. So how do we create an environment to leverage these insights? Your interactions. So I want you to think about who you're interacting with. When you're doing user research or interviews or usability testing, think about the last time you did one of those, when you ran that. All right. What types of questions did you ask? Were they the type of questions that would lead insights to how people were using your products and services to solve different problems that you did not intend for? When you're working with your team and you're doing usability testing, and this is where I actually see it's not really necessarily the product community, but their team members. When you do usability testing, who goes out there and does it with you? Designers, sometimes your team members, sometimes the engineers. It just depends. Different companies, different structures, different amount of availability. The people that are very passionate about it being used the way that they designed for it, they're going to get very hands-on with your customers, and they're going to show them how to walk through it. And you may know not to do that, but they almost cannot hold themselves back. So think about the interactions that you're having, and if you're creating space to be able to see how your product's being used in different ways. The data. When you build your data structures, when you're saying, hey, these are our goals, these are the metrics we want to hit, this is how we know when we've reached adoption. Think about how you're organizing that. Are you organizing it in a way to where it's going to tell you the story you want to hear? Or are you organizing it in a way where it's going to give you the full experience of how they misuse your product? And think about your frameworks. Now, a lot of reading materials out there, a lot of frameworks to use. I want to see if anybody in this room can name and label off all the frameworks and methods associated to product management. It's a lot. It is a lot. There's one more specifically. So everybody looking at those books, what are some that stick out to you? Things that you've given away, you've read, just call it out. Lean Startup. Jobs to be done. Start with why. Inspired. Anybody use that little purple book with the bird on it? The user story mapping one? Probably the most stolen book I've ever had from my library. Every time I seem to buy one, it seems not to come back. I think it's just an easy read. It's a fun read. Lots of pictures too. Quick. So let's lean in there real quick. User story mapping. How many of y'all do some sort of user story mapping with your teams, at least at one point in time around your product lifecycle? Yeah, it's pretty good. Have you done that get up and get out activity with it? If not, there's a fun activity where you get the room to get together and they say all the steps they have to do from the moment they wake up to get out the door first thing in the morning. And what you start to realize is they have different routines. And when you try to map out those different routines, you can't necessarily do it. There's not one process or one pattern that fits everybody. But what you do realize is you can start to look at those exchanges, trade-offs, those different steps and sub-steps. You can look at them in a uniform way to where if you were to build something or the ideal process, you could roughly apply to that grouping. But they usually forget one activity. So when you go through, the way the activity goes is all the steps you have to do, and then the scenario changes. They say, all right, we're going to do another round, but you woke up 20 minutes late. What are the things you're not going to do now? And you get worried when one person says, not brushing my teeth. And you're like, okay, you could have got rid of the shower, but no, that's fine. Let's go with the not brushing teeth. But they always forget one activity. And so this is where unlearning has started to occur. I'm starting to look at how this fits different, especially with observing how my child interacts with things differently. They're not prescribed. And it's step 5, and this is around the developmental strategy aspect of it. And so if you're familiar with this process, those are great visuals associated to the user story map. It used to be sticky notes on walls, and now it's Miro. But you draw a line in the sand, basically, and you said everything above this line is what we're going to focus on, and we'll call that, quote unquote, our MVP or our first release or whatever we want to call it. And everything below it can wait. But when things drop below the line, sometimes you still have to build something lightweight above the line just to have the full end-to-end experience. Well, not everything can go above the line. It wouldn't be an MVP, and we care about words. So we have to build scaffolding. The scaffolding costs money in real world. Anybody in the construction business or close to the construction business? A little bit? Does it cost money? It does. It's not free. Who pays for scaffolding? Your customer pays for it. They're not purchasing it, but they pay for it. Okay? Because you have to have it. But again, that's not what they want to buy. So don't give them that. So these are where your metaphors around technical debt and everything else comes into play, but it has to be a part of the thing that you build. And if you don't even create space for how can I build for it, you won't. You won't build scaffolding into your product and your service. And it gets very expensive. And most of you probably walked, if you walked this building from a parking lot or a different building, you either walked underneath it or you walked around it or you see it. It's a part of the build. But when you don't create intentionality around building it into the plan, and then also removing it from the building and the product and service, you won't. So then I'm sitting with my child. We're in, I want to say, Austin, Texas. It's been a long day. Everybody's working remote, and it's time for him to get out of the bathtub. Bath time, if you think back, this is one of the ones where you can do, I was a kid once, think about fond memories back in the day, you probably had fun during bath time. I know that my kids do. And then I said, all right, time to get out of the bath. He's having a good time. And I'm like, well, sorry you're having a good time, but it's time to get out of the bath. We have to get out of here because dinner's on the table and we have to do the next thing. And I did. And I was exposed to this Oprah episode where this doctor comes in and she talks about why. Why do you have these expectations associated to your kid in the time zone and everything else? Like, why was that the biggest deal at the time? Why did you have to take your son out of that fun element? What was so pressing at the time? I didn't know. I didn't have a good answer. And I'm glad that like my wife and I were watching these documentaries and we're seeing these things and we can bring it to each other's attention because I just went through a routine. I just knew, hey, normally after bath time, we go into dinner time. And I pulled him from a fun situation. And instead of sitting down and joining him, I told him no. I didn't understand why. And I want to bring it to your attention of how this might overlay with what you do in the day-to-day associated to your products and services. I had to relearn the iron triangle. And so when you think about the iron triangle, you hear about time, scope, and cost. And then they always say the hidden one and how it always comes in together is quality. That could be a different discussion. But ultimately, I didn't know that I had as much leverage or as much decisioning, as much optionality associated to time as I do. And so when you're thinking about iron triangle with your teams and you're discussing when you're going to go launch your product and what are you going to build and what's going to go to market when, how much thought are you giving into the time component other than sooner is better? I know there's retail in the Charlotte area as well. So sometimes your decision is made associated to Black Friday holidays or anything else. But I just want you to take a step back. When you have the pressure on to get something out, why? Why is that the best timing? And to think about this a little bit differently, because I know that now that I've seen that and had that experience, I think about it differently. Are we just trying to get it out the door because we're spending money on it? Or have we built enough excitement with our customer base to where they're asking for it at a certain time? How are we bringing them along with it? What is the experience that we've created with them associated to this release? Because just because you put it into a production state doesn't mean it now costs less money. And again, I want to emphasize that when you're making a decision to move from one thing to the next, keep your eye on the price. Because I forgot, it's that happy face right there. It's really what I was trying to achieve with a fun bath time. It's why I bought him bath toys. It's why we have bubble soap that breaks his skin out. Truce. Another thing that was a parallel for me and in the parenting and the product space is you don't know what you're getting yourself into. Every time you decide to build a product, a service, you're saying, I want customers. That's usually what you're telling yourself. And then usually, and sometimes in life, you're saying, you know what, let's get married, let's have kids. I want kids. And you really rush and you're blind by the association of that event. Let's get this out. Let's get this into production. Or we're reaching, let's get product market fit. You're striving for that event and time. You don't really understand the true costs. You only think about upfront costs associated to the thing. You're not thinking about what is the cost of acquisition of a customer, but more importantly, how much is it going to cost me to retain customers? So if I grow from 500 to 5,000 customers overnight, how much is that going to impact me? Am I going to be prepared? Am I going to be prepared for my kid to go from 4 to 5 and go to school for the first time? Have I thought about bus routes? Have I thought about what I'm doing with customer data? How am I ensuring our customer base that I'm responsible with their data? That might be easy enough when I have a few customers, but when that grows wildly, am I set up for it? Have I thought about it carefully? Have I shared with the customer what I plan to do with their data? And so often we go through these things in life, these quote unquote milestones, and we think about reaching it. We don't think about the care that comes after having it. And that was a big learning for me as well. And it shapes a lot of the decisions I make now when we're working on products and services in our organization. It's not done when it's delivered, it's done when it's sunset or retired. It's a very similar aspect of it's not done when the child's born or healthy or at home. And it's not even done when they graduate college. It's a big investment. And so when you make these decisions in your product or in your personal life, are you making it for that, those decisions way down the way? Or are you making them for today? I only gave 3 associated to like those things that I've had to unlearn over the past couple of years, but this falls along into all of these categories. Associated accounting, we talked a little bit about data responsibility highlight, but product ethics. Really, what type of social impact are you going to make with your release? And was that intentional? 5 whys. If you have a kid, you know that they're really good at the 5 whys aspect of life. They're going to ask why on everything. Do you have an answer? I'll tell you what, because I said so doesn't work in the product world. And it shouldn't work at home either. That's it.